The rain hammered against the windows like 1,000 desperate fingers, each drop a plea for mercy in the November storm. Inside his modest apartment, Marcus Chen stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup that would have to stretch for 3 days instead of one. His daughter Emma sat at the kitchen table, her small fingers wrapped around a crayon, drawing another picture of the family she wished they still had. It had been 8 months since the accident took his wife Sarah, 8 months of learning to braid hair with YouTube tutorials, of burning dinners and crying in the shower where Emma couldn't hear him, of being both mother and father to a 6-year-old who still set a place at the table for mommy sometimes. The knock at the door came during a crack of thunder so loud it made them both jump. Marcus glanced at the clock. 9:30. Nobody knocked at 9:30 on a Thursday night in this neighborhood, where people minded their business and kept their doors locked. He moved to the peephole, his body instinctively positioning itself between Emma and whatever waited on the other side. What he saw made his breath catch. A woman stood in the hallway, her clothes soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her face. But it wasn't her that made Marcus's hand freeze on the doorknob. It was the little boy she held against her chest, wrapped in a jacket too thin for November, his face pressed into her shoulder. The child couldn't have been more than 4 years old, and even through the distorted fisheye lens, Marcus could see he was shivering. "Please," the woman's voice came through the door, barely audible over the storm. "Please, we just need shelter tonight." Every instinct Marcus had developed as a single father in a city that could be cruel screamed at him to walk away. He had Emma to think about. They barely had enough for themselves. He didn't know these people. This could be a setup, a robbery, 100 different nightmares that played out on the evening news. But then the little boy lifted his head, and Marcus saw his face properly. Those eyes, wide and frightened, could have been Emma's eyes. That trembling lip could have been his daughter's lip. And suddenly, Marcus wasn't looking at strangers anymore. He was looking at what he and Emma might have been if circumstances had been different, if the roles had been reversed, if that rainy night 8 months ago had ended even worse than it did. His hand turned the lock before his mind could stop it. "Come in," he said, opening the door. Quickly. The woman stumbled inside, the little boy still clutched to her chest. Up close, Marcus could see the exhaustion carved into her face, the kind that went beyond one sleepless night. This was the exhaustion of weeks, maybe months, of running on empty. "Thank you," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the words. "Thank you. I'm Diana, and this is my son Leo. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to bother you, but the shelter downtown is full, and we've been walking since." "It's okay," Marcus interrupted gently. He could see she was on the edge of breaking, held together by nothing but necessity and the child in her arms. "Let me get you some towels." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes huge. "Daddy, it's all right, sweetheart. We have some friends who need help tonight." He tried to make his voice steady, calm, the way Sarah used to when she wanted to show Emma that everything was under control. As Diana and Leo dried off, the story came out in fragments. A husband who turned violent. A restraining order that was just paper. A job lost because she kept showing up with bruises she couldn't explain. A car that died 3 states away from her sister's house in Portland. Money running out. Options disappearing. The long, desperate slide from middle-class stability into the terrifying uncertainty of homelessness, where every night was a question mark and every closed door another rejection. Marcus listened, and with each sentence, he saw his own life from a different angle. He thought of Sarah, of the insurance payout that had saved them, of his parents who lived 10 minutes away and watched Emma every Tuesday and Thursday. He thought of all the invisible threads that held his life together, threads he'd never noticed until he saw someone without them. "You can take the couch," he said when Diana finally fell silent. "I have extra blankets. Are you hungry?" He watched Diana's face crumble, watched her try to hold it together and fail. "We haven't eaten since this morning." Marcus reheated the soup, suddenly grateful that he'd made too much, that his mother had dropped off bread yesterday, that there were apples in the fruit bowl Emma never touched because she only liked bananas. He set the table and tried not to watch too obviously as Leo ate with the focused intensity of a child who'd learned that food wasn't guaranteed. Emma, bless her heart, brought her stuffed elephant to the table and placed it next to Leo. "Mr. Trunks gets scared in storms too," she said solemnly. "But he's brave. You can hold him if you want." Something shifted in the room then, some invisible barrier breaking down. Leo reached for the elephant with gravy-stained fingers, and Emma smiled, and Diana started crying in earnest, her shoulders shaking as she tried to muffle the sobs with her hand. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." "Don't be," Marcus said quietly, passing her a napkin because it was all he had. "You're being a good mother. That's nothing to apologize for." That night, after Diana and Leo had fallen asleep on the couch, Marcus lay in his own bed and thought about the door. About how easily he could have left it locked. About how the distance between safety and catastrophe was sometimes just one person's choice, one moment of compassion, one door opening instead of staying closed. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 8 months. He spent the day making phone calls, pulling on every thread of the social safety net he could find. A friend from church who ran a women's shelter had a space opening up next week. His cousin knew someone hiring at a warehouse that offered childcare. His mother, when he finally told her, wept into the phone and showed up an hour later with bags of groceries and children's clothes Emma had outgrown. It took 3 weeks, but they found Diana a job, a spot in a transitional housing program, and a path forward that didn't involve sleeping on park benches or knocking on strangers' doors in the rain. On the day Diana and Leo moved into their new place, she hugged Marcus so tight he thought his ribs might crack. "You saved us," she said. "You opened your door when everyone else locked theirs." But Marcus knew different. That night in the storm, shivering and desperate, they had saved him too. They'd reminded him that grief hadn't made him hard, that loss hadn't made him selfish, that even when you're barely holding on yourself, you can still open your door. You can still be the answer to someone's desperate prayer in the rain. Because sometimes being human isn't about having enough. It's about sharing what little you have. It's about seeing yourself in a stranger's frightened eyes and choosing compassion over fear, connection over safety, hope over the easy comfort of a locked door. And in the end, that choice doesn't just save the people standing in the rain. It saves the person standing on the other side of the door too.